Hello, today we're actually going to learn how to use the NUnit framework. We're going to go over how to use the NUnit IDE as well as how to create a simple unit test and attach the NUnit IDE to that unit test so we can debug it. The first thing you need to do, if you haven't already done so, is you need to go out and download the NUnit framework. You can get that from nunit.org. Once you've got it downloaded, you need to go ahead and add a reference to your project. Go ahead and select the nunit.framework.dll. And there you go, I've added that to my project. Let's go ahead and create a simple test so we can start using the NUnit framework. Now the first thing you're going to need to do is go ahead and add a reference to the NUnit framework library, as well as I'm going to go ahead and add reference to the syntax helpers as well, because I'm going to use that in a few minutes. This is the main library that NUnit uses, and this will always have to be imported. Depending on how you want to do your assertions, this is optional. In order to create a test or a class as a test fixture in NUnit, the class must be public, and you've got to give it the attribute test fixture. This test fixture attribute actually tells the NUnit framework that this class may have test inside of it, and you want to look into it to see if there's anything with the test attribute. Once we've got our class set up to be a test fixture, we're actually going to want to go ahead and create a simple test. The attribute you need to use is test. That actually tells the NUnit framework that this method is a test method. Let's go ahead and create our test method. Now you'll notice three things real quick. In order for a test to be, this test method to be valid, it needs to be public, it must be void, and can have absolutely no parameters. If any of these are not set this way, you'll actually not see it in the IDE, and you may actually start wondering why and what happened. Because we're not actually learning how to create unit tests just yet, I'll have that in some future screencasts. I'm going to go ahead and just assert something is true. That way we guarantee the pass. Now I actually want to point out two things real quick. I've got two lines here that will do the exact same thing. Assert that and assert are equal. They basically do the same thing. The NUnit framework has multiple ways to use the assertion logic. The new method, which is using the that syntax, is considered the constraint model, and it kind of flows more like a fluent interface, or a fluent model would go. The older syntax, which is also known as the classic syntax, uses the are and the are equals and are not equals. Everything you can do with the classic model, you can do with the constraint model. The only difference is you're going to use the is helper, and that's where the syntax helper import comes into play. So let's go ahead and compile this. Okay, now that it compiles, a very simple test, but let me show the concept here. We actually need to use the NUnit framework, or IDE. So I'm going to go ahead and go to C program file NUnit bin, and find this NUnit.exe. This is our NUnit test runner. This is what the UI looks like. In order to use this, you're going to need to go ahead and create a new project. I recommend storing the project file in your output directory. It'll just make life easier. And basically by creating a project, it allows NUnit to keep a list of all the assemblies that you think are as one unit or one test suite. Once you've got that set up, go ahead and click Project, Add Assembly. We're going to go ahead and change this and find my output directory. In my assembly, I want to test. Oh, looks like I may have put my project file in the wrong spot. That's actually what happens when you don't put your project file in the same directory as your assemblies you're trying to test. It is now, so let's go ahead and do that. Click Add Assembly. There you go. That error message we got is a direct result of putting the project file in the wrong directory. So you'll get that exception, and you may scratch your head as to why. In order to get around that, simply create your project, inside of your output directory. You'll notice that when the NUnit IDE loads the assembly, it actually reflects the assembly and will find all classes that have the fixture attribute, so this attribute here, and then all methods that have the test attribute, and it'll load them up. And you'll see that the way it's loaded is assembly, namespace, class name, individual tests. Let's go ahead and click the sum simple test. In order to run a single test, you just simply select it, click run, and as expected, our assertion did pass. When this passes, it's green. Green means good. When it's been ignored or something's wrong but it's not a failure, it's yellow. Yellow means there's potential issues. And when something does fail, it'll be red. Red, yellow, green. Let's go ahead and make this fail just so that we can show what happens. I'm going to go ahead and recompile this. You notice that the IDE refreshed itself. It notices that the assembly has changed. It's going to go ahead and rebind to it. Let's click run. You'll notice this failed. It's turned red. But not only did it fail and turn red, it'll actually tell you the test class, what was expected, and what it actually was. And then down here you can actually go and it'll tell you the exact line of code. Very useful information in here. Well, let's try to figure out why this test failed. Well, we want to debug this. Because the NUnit IDE is not a part of the Visual Studio IDE, we actually have to go through a little bit of a pain, but it's not too big of a deal. We're going to have to attach our Visual Studio IDE to the NUnit IDE runner, or test runner. So to do that, go Tools, Attach to Process, and we'll scroll down and find the NUnit.exe assembly. We'll go ahead and click Attach. And you'll notice that my IDE is now in run mode. I'm going to go ahead and put a breakpoint on this assertion and go ahead and come on back over here. And see, now it does step into it, and I can actually step over and everything's all good. And this still failed because I didn't modify the test, but what I just did demonstrate is how you attach to it. Let's actually keep this failing, but let's give ourselves a little bit more meaning. You'll notice that the assert that method is overridden many times, and one of them is a output message. But this output message is very beneficial for you if you actually create something, a message that's actually usable, such as like the variable XYZ is meant to contain 5 but has 6. You'll actually help yourself in the future. So let's go ahead and recompile this. That recompiled just fine. Go ahead and click run. But when this failed, you'll see that message, something failed here. Here's the message, and here it is there. Actually shows up in here. This actually can potentially give you some more information. So very good thing to get into the habit of creating messages within your assertions. Well, there you go. We've kind of done a real quick whirlwind tour of how to use NUnit. This isn't a all-encompassing demo, as I will have further examples later on that will kind of go into this in more detail. But what we should have learned today is we need to use the NUnit framework, that we need to use the test fixture attribute on any class that we wish to test, and that test must be public. That we need to use the test attribute on any method that is a test method. And in order for that method to be valid, it needs to be public void some simple test without parameters. One thing I want to hit on real quick is I called this some simple test. If this was a real test, I'd want it to be a lot more descriptive. I would want the method to be something like attempting to send email via email server that is not found. Very long-winded, yes, but very descriptive. Allows somebody running my test to know exactly what the intent of the test is. One other thing to keep in mind is a test is supposed to be small and simple. Should not do multiple testings. Does not mean you can't have multiple asserts. It means that you shouldn't test multiple things. For example, you shouldn't be trying to send an email and check to see if the database was hit as well. Do those in separate things. We've kind of reviewed the assert that and assert our equal syntax, but they are the same, it's just different ways of accomplishing the same thing. The assert object, or the assert class, is the helper class that's part of the NUnit framework. There are a few others. One of them is collection assert, there's file assert, there's string assert, there's various different ones. You may need them from time to time going forward, but the assert class would tend to get you there and let you do enough. We've learned how to use and how to kind of look at the NUnit IDE and how to read it and how to find if there's an error, where to get the message. We've also learned how to attach it to the process in order to do our debugging. So I hope this was educational, and until next time.